Welcome. Thank you for being here today as we focus on issues specific to Eastern Europe. As always, a quick disclaimer. Please take a moment to read. Ultimately, this webinar is for informational purposes only. Some quick housekeeping. During the session, please feel free to submit any queries in the question section of your control panel. We will follow up with you shortly after the session. Please also ensure to check out the handout section of your control panel for any additional information. And thank you for being on today's call. We know how valuable your time is. This session will be recorded and a link will be made available within the next few days. My name is Leanne Avis and I have been with G2 Risk Solutions for over 9 years now. Here at G2RS, we are passionate about driving customer success and ensuring that G2 Risk Solutions services deliver maximum value by building strong client relationships and taking pride in understanding customer needs, ensuring that we are delivering exceptional results at all times. I currently reside in England with my young family, and I'm very honoured to partner with many of G2RS's valued customers around the globe. I am now very pleased to introduce my esteemed colleague Andreas, who will be doing the lion's share of the information sharing today. Andreas is a seasoned finance professional with deep expertise in high-risk merchant underwriting and compliance. Active in the industry since 2006, he began his career in banking before then transitioning into compliance at one of Europe's largest acquiring banks. He went on to lead a due diligence team at a major MMSP, supporting acquiring banks in identifying and managing risk. Before returning to underwriting as a senior expert, Andreas managed WebShield Germany, co-authored a well-regarded industry book, hosted academy training sessions, and was a featured speaker at Risk Connect. His core specialisation is in detecting transaction laundering and fraudulent merchant activity, and we are of course very excited to hear some of his insights today.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Leanne. Now, the topics we will discuss today are all about Eastern Europe. First, we will talk about digital payment trends in Eastern Europe, highlighting changes in payment behaviors and somewhat transaction behaviors. Followed by that, we will talk about a few high-risk merchant insights, examining trends in sectors like gambling and cryptocurrency. Followed up by that, we will also talk about regulatory changes affecting those high-risk businesses. Our last topic will be very exciting because this will give you a market overview of the region based on some real-life case studies of current fraudulent merchants and interesting numbers in terms of transaction laundering incidents and reported violations within the Eastern European region over the last 12 months. Now, let's look at digital payments in Eastern Europe. While digital payments have been growing rapidly, the pace has kind of slowed down in 2024. Cash still plays a key role, especially for small transactions. In 2024, cash made up 52% of point-of-sale payments. However, 45% of transaction values were processed via cards and 7% through mobile wallets, kind of showing that the shift from cash to digital is ongoing, but not yet complete. Now, with this shift from cash to digital, some key trends are emerging, and I would like to talk with you about those. First of all, digital wallets and so-called super apps. Now, platforms like Revolut, Paysera, and Wise now offering services beyond payments, such as insurance, investments, and even loyalty programs, kind of reshaping how consumers use financial tools. Revolut, for example, has over 10 million users in Central and Eastern Europe and is emerging as a leading super app in the whole region. I also want to touch upon the trend of embedded finance and banking as a service, because both are on the rise as well. Embedded finance kind of means financial services that are integrated into non-financial platforms. Now, this is an exciting space because this whole space is expected to grow from 8.9 billion in 2024 to a tremendous amount of 36.1 billion within the next 10 years globally. Now, this opens new opportunities for businesses to offer these financial products directly to consumers through their platforms. but it also challenges acquirers with enhanced due diligence processes that need to be implemented. Lastly, I also want to touch upon very quickly the topic of contactless payments, because they are becoming ubiquitous in Eastern Europe, with 72% of card transactions in places like Poland and the Czech Republic now being contactless. Even the European Central Bank has reported a 10.1 increase in non-cash payments early 2024 compared to 2023. Now, while we are seeing a slower growth in this whole digital payments development, the trends point clearly to significant opportunities for innovation and a lot of changes in the coming years. Now, let's zoom in some individual countries within Eastern Europe and actually see how they are adapting to these digital payment trends. And first of all, we need to talk about Poland, because Poland continues to lead the region in digital payment adoption. Today, around 30% of consumers use digital wallets, which is basically a 3% increase from the previous year. Now, this growth is highly driven by smartphone penetration and a general strong agile fintech ecosystem. On the other hand, the Czech Republic is also seeing a strong momentum in both e-commerce and contactless payments. Now, more than half of the population shops online, and there's a clear demand for smooth, seamless payment experiences. Overall, the Czech Republic now ranks amongst the top countries in the region for digital payment infrastructure. And this is basically a result of the fact that a lot of local banks have been heavily investing in payment technologies over the past years. I also want to touch upon very quickly on Hungary, which is also experiencing a steady growth in mobile and digital payments, particularly in e-commerce, which is also driven by a wider smartphone use and increased comfort with online shopping. Although exact year-to-year figures did vary by source, which why I have decided to not give you a specific number, because I could not validate that information 100%. Now, I also want to talk with you very quickly about Romania, where contactless payments are also growing. And even MasterCard has reported that in some years they've reached up to 70% of total card transactions, showing a strong consumer adoption. Now, the Eastern European region is huge and there are so many countries, but these figures are just a few examples. But they show a clear trend that Eastern European countries are increasingly adopting to digital payment technologies. Now, moving on to high-risk merchants. And high-risk merchants are businesses that operate in sectors like gambling, adult entertainment, and cryptocurrencies. Now, these businesses face increased scrutiny and usually more likely to be targeted for fraud and regulatory action. And when I talk about high-risk merchants, I usually talk about gambling, so let's gamble a little bit. Now, in countries like Romania, Hungary, and the Czech Republic, online gambling continues rapidly. The growth continues rapidly. And this is kind of due to a shift of consumer preferences towards digital entertainment. And as more players engage with online betting platforms, well, the market is becoming both more competitive, but also more regulated. And operators now must adhere to very strict licensing requirements, enforce age and ID verification, and comply with anti-fraud and responsible gaming protocols. Now, regulators in these countries and basically in the whole region are increasingly focused on consumer protection, mandating greater transparency in odds, payout processes, and advertising standards. As a result, fraud prevention, data security, and compliance automation have become critical for platforms kind of looking to scale sustainably while also avoiding regulatory penalties. Now, this bridge might sound a little bit weird, but when we talk about gambling, cryptocurrency is usually not too far away. And the cryptocurrency adoption basically continues to grow across Eastern Europe, especially in markets like the Ukraine, the complete CIS region, and Turkey. We're seeing rising use of DeFi platforms and increasing transaction volumes as digital assets basically gain traction as both investment vehicle and alternative payment method. But with this growth comes heightened regulatory scrutiny. Now, governments in countries like Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria are stepping up enforcement around KYC and AML requirements. Crypto exchanges and traders must now implement stronger ID checks, transaction monitoring, and detailed compliance reporting. And this is actually very interesting because these evolving rules aim to reduce illicit financial activity and kind of bring the crypto space closer in line with traditional finance. And this is actually a kind of fun fact if you think about it, because the whole idea of cryptocurrencies was to have a decentralized financial ecosystem. And now the gap becomes more close and moves in line with the traditional finance. So the development in the next few years in that regard is going to be very interesting to observe. Now, while this all creates new compliance challenges, it also opens up opportunity for firms and acquirers alike that move fast and stay ahead of that regulatory curve. Now, talking about regulatory curves, these regulatory changes are a key concern for businesses in high-risk sectors. So let's take a look at what's happening in the gambling and cryptocurrency industries in Eastern Europe. Starting with gambling regulations. In Poland, 2024 brought stricter online gambling laws, with focus on protecting players, enforcing these age checks, and increasing platform accountability. The Czech Republic, on the other hand, has revised its gambling framework to improve general oversight of online operators and ensure better tax transparency. I also want to mention Hungary because they have introduced new consumer protection standards requiring platforms to enhance data security, transparency, and user support. And I found this kind of funny because I wonder what's the background story or the reason for particular user support. But usually there's a funny background story behind these kind of requirements. Now, you probably have wondered when we talked about cryptocurrency before, what about MiCA? Well, since December 2024, the MiCA framework has been standardizing rules for cryptocurrency, asset issuance, trading, and custody across the European Union. Meanwhile, countries like Poland and Romania are tightening enforcement with stricter KYC and AML regulations for exchanges, including ID verification, and this is very interesting, source of funds tracking, and real-time transaction monitoring. And this will become very important in terms of money muling through these cryptocurrency exchanges. Now, as enforcement increases, you can already see major exchanges like Coinbase have delisted non-compliant stablecoins, basically underlying the growing focus on compliance. Now, what does that mean for acquirers? Well, with tighter regulations in both gambling and crypto, acquirers must enhance due diligence and ensure to be compliant with both MiCA and local laws. So, high-risk sectors already require strong risk models to manage fraud, prevent chargebacks, and be aware of regulatory requirements. On the long run, tools like geofencing and close transaction monitoring will become essential. Now, I want also to talk with you about a business that is not per definition high risk, but it can become a high risk business very fast. Let's touch upon nutraceuticals, which is a fast-growing sector not only in Eastern Europe, but basically globally. And these are dietary supplements. And again, while the market is continuously expanding, the regulatory environment is becoming more and more complex. And just to give you a brief information, from 2025, Poland has introduced new rules that tightening controls on specific ingredients. For example, supplements containing more than 6 milligrams of vitamin B6 per daily dosage are no longer permitted. In addition to that, also only approved chemical forms of iron will be allowed in new formulations. However, there are a few more countries, and there's nothing clearly specific yet, but looking ahead to Romania and Hungary, while they both have not implemented major changes yet, both are signaling a move towards tighter controls. Now, what does that mean? Romania, for instance, is considering a Nutri-Score system to improve consumer labeling, while Hungary is updating its food information regulations, which actually could directly affect how these supplements are being marketed and sold in the near future. In short, and this actually applies for the whole Eastern European market, we expect more oversight in these markets very soon, possibly including safety audits, further ingredient restrictions, and much stricter enforcement by the regulators. Now, for acquirers and merchants alike, that means staying ahead of these changes will be key. And let's face it, content monitoring will become mandatory and more important than it's now already. Now, looking ahead, the future of digital payments and regulatory frameworks in Eastern Europe, well, it's kind of bright, but it's also very challenging. What does that mean? I mean, the digital payment market is expected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 11.5% over the next 5 years, highly driven by the expansion of mobile wallets, embedded finance, and increased adoption of contactless payments. But what's the outlook for regulatory developments? Very general and very briefly. Well, in gambling, you can actually expect moves towards unified European standards, which actually could affect national licensing, especially in some countries that we mentioned before. I mean, stricter ad rules are being debated in Poland and Slovakia, while Romania and Bulgaria may enforce stronger self-exclusion tools. In crypto, yes, MiCA is active, but national measures are still tightening. Hungary and Lithuania are looking at tougher tax reporting, and Poland is exploring real-time transaction monitoring. Now, this will be very interesting and important as DeFi and staking regulation is also gaining attention as the European Union actually considers to expanding the MiCA framework. For nutraceuticals, well, the Czech Republic and Hungary are kind of reviewing stricter rules on imports and labeling for online health products. Bottom line here is there's a strong market potential, but businesses and acquirers alike must stay ahead of regulation to stay competitive and grow sustainably. Now that we got all the kind of dry facts done, we can move into very exciting topics. The current market situation in Eastern Europe. Now, I would like to start this with a case study of AI scams that we have seen, probably particular in the Eastern European region in the last 4 to 5 months. And I'm not talking here about these deepfake merchants. No, I actually talk about merchants that claim to sell normal AI solutions. And so far, we could break it down in 3 different categories, if you so will. So first, you have the AI scams or these AI merchants that are basically selling or reselling stolen images. How this works or looks in detail, I will show you in a few minutes when we actually look at one of those merchants. The next issue are AI merchants that basically illegally reselling prominent AI solutions. And usually the setup is done in a way where cardholders sign up and then have to top up their account. Now, as soon as they want to utilize a service, for instance, image generation, they get charged in tokens by the number of words they use for the description or how many different images they want. However, what happens in the background is actually that these AI merchants utilizing prominent AI solutions such as ChatGPT or DALL-E for image generation without their knowledge, without a reselling agreement, and usually for a much higher price than what cardholders would have paid at the original source. And I haven't read through the terms and conditions of ChatGPT, but I doubt they will be happy if someone is reselling their service for top price compared to their own pricing. Now, the last one is actually very concerning because we've also seen a number of merchants where we have a strong suspicion that they are actually used to launder transactions for gambling merchants. And I can recall a particular example from probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, which was also set up where the cardholder has to sign up. And after that, he could top up his account. However, only with very generic ticket sizes. So you had 25 euro, 50 euro, 100 euros, and so on. And these generic ticket sizes are usually already an indicator that there might be something sketchy going on in the background. And these are usually patterns that you will find on gambling merchants. However, what really hit the nail was the fact that before signing up, he only promoted image generation and 3D model generation on his website. But once you logged in, the merchant also had a marketplace where cardholders could basically resell their own generated 3D models or images. Now, within this marketplace, there were additional terms and conditions, including a very detailed payout plan and a very quick copyscape analysis of this payment plan or these terms and conditions of the marketplace. Quite fast unrevealed that this is more or less a standardized text that is used on many gambling websites for their payout process. So the bottom line is you need to stay aware with these AI merchants. And when we take a look at the case study right now, you will know why. Before I'm going to move into that, I also want to highlight, yes, while we have seen quite a few merchants coming out of the Eastern European region, in the past 2-3 months, also a lot of merchants were coming from the United Kingdom. So if you get new incorporated companies out of the United Kingdom offering AI solution services, maybe pay extra attention. Now let's look at to one of the merchants that was reselling stolen images. So the setup of the website was basically they have pre-created those images already, and you could basically download them and then have the copyright on them. Now, interestingly enough, when we reviewed the merchant a couple of weeks ago, we reported a lot of IP violations because it was obvious that the images, well, these were images that you have seen somewhere before, most likely. Now, when I reviewed the merchant again for this example, all these reported IP violations were removed, but so was basically almost all of the content. So I thought, let's explore it together and look at popular images that the merchant is reselling. And pay attention, he even got a watermark on them. Now, in such cases, you can conduct a very quick reverse Google image search, and you will see, let me do that very quickly, that even on the first row of research results, the image appears twice, once randomly on a website, but also on a website where the image is already commercialized for quite a different price than what our merchant offered. Now, I tried to look further and actually find the original image. I'm not sure if that's the key, but or if the one I will show you now is the one, but this one is completely free available. And I doubt that the creator or the artist is allowing a merchant to commercialize on his work. But there's more. There's also an upcoming trend again of these top-up services and gift card merchants. And yes, you probably have seen these kind of merchants before because this is a thing that is going on for many years already. But in the past months, the number of merchants that popping up is increasing, and it's actually quite concerning. And I'm gonna show you very briefly one of those websites. And I mean, as an underwriter, at one point you got a gut feeling when you look at a website and can probably feel maybe I should investigate a bit further, or maybe this is a very reasonable and serious merchant. And while it's very important to conduct the background research with the very basic merchant details, which is also the thing how we uncovered the transaction ordering of this merchant, I would also put the focus very quickly on social media presence. So, I mean, the general rule is that you need to make sure that the social media presence kind of aligns with the business the merchant is offering on the website. And I mean, we can see here top-up service and gift cards. Okay, that's a match. But there's more to it. As you can see, this merchant has 4,000 or almost 4,000 people following. But the engagement on his social media presence, well, is almost non-existent. The picture where I hovered over was uploaded 7 weeks ago. 2 likes. So I scrolled a bit further down and looked back into the first images that were probably uploaded 1 year ago. And even there was not a lot of interaction, maybe 20 likes. But what was interesting, on a few pictures, there were also comments in the preview. As soon as we opened that, all of a sudden there were no comments available, meaning that the merchant actively has hidden those comments from the public. And I also want to touch very quickly about these likes. If you have the extra minute, it's worth. Just look at a few pictures and the likes, because quite fast you will see if you follow these accounts that first of all, usually it's the same people that are giving the likes. And secondly, quite often it's simply bots or fake accounts. Now back to the exciting part. How did we detect the transaction laundering? Well, actually, it was no rocket science. We did a very basic research with the billing descriptor of the merchant, and on the first page of the Google research, a website popped up that if you not know this website yet and have to deal with high-risk merchants or kind of dodgy merchants from time to time, you should bookmark it, Casino Guru. It's not only a great resource for gambling relevant news in general, but it's also very helpful because of the forum they have. And here we can see it. Questions about gambling websites with Curaçao licenses using incorrect merchant category codes. Now, a quick research for our merchant's billing descriptor unrevealed that he's actually part of 48 different conversations in this forum. And I'm not gonna go into the details and follow up with everything, but I just want to highlight very quickly one conversation where even users were aware of the email address of our merchant, and both users individually mentioned actually the gambling operator that was involved in the whole scheme. So these top up and gift card merchants, well, are usually a red flag, and you should be very, very smart about your choices when you're onboarding these merchants. So a proper background research is really necessary and helpful. Now, to close it up, I would like to touch very quickly upon some statistics in terms of violating content and transaction laundering cases that we have seen in the last 12 months out of the Eastern European region. And here you can see that the majority of content violations is still coming through adult entertainment merchants and nutraceuticals. Well, for adult merchants, I would say there are two problems. First of all, these huge tube websites. They are confronted with thousands of videos and images on an hourly basis. And yes, while they should make sure they review all the content prior publication, I doubt all of them are doing that. And so they probably have automated or AI-driven technology to actually monitor that prior publication, but I doubt they all do that. And we've seen that quite frequently, actually. But another big reason for this high number of reported adult content violations is simply coming from companies that kind of well established and produce the content by themselves, but usually in these kind of niche areas. And it's either they're not fully aware of what is allowed and what is not allowed, or they simply not really care about it. And sometimes it can be as simple as they have a scene with a table and the actors are drinking alcoholic beverages, and over a sudden you have a potential non-consensual action. Now with nutraceuticals, on the other hand, it's a bit simpler in quotation marks. We have seen and learned that, well, regulatory changes can come in very fast, and maybe over a sudden ingredients are simply no longer allowed. Sometimes you also have the issue that a merchant is selling a product where an ingredient is completely legal, and over a sudden he serves another jurisdiction or cardholders from another country where it's not legal. The last thing that leads to that is simply merchants that use usually images to have, well, basically the description of the product, including all the ingredients of the nutraceutical. Now, in terms of transaction laundering cases in the last 12 months, there are two big threats: IP rights and gambling. For gambling, I guess it's pretty clear what that means. However, for IP rights, a majority of reported merchants in that area basically conducting transaction laundering for IPTV services, like these merchants where a cardholder signs up for a subscription or pays a one-time amount and all of a sudden has access to a lot of pay TV networks or multiple streaming service providers. One last thing I would like to explain here is also, what does it mean? Suspected and confirmed. Suspected basically means we find a certain number of indicators, but we cannot nail it down and prove 100% that this is actually transaction laundering. On the other hand, confirmed basically means we found multiple indicators that give us the conclusion that this is a transaction laundering case. And in most of the cases, we can also back up the decision with a successful test transaction. Now, before I give back the word to Liane, one more thing. If you remember the reverse Google image research, and this applies not only for Eastern Europe, actually it applies for for the European region. In the past 2 months, we have seen again a rising number of dating merchants that kind of use these chatbots to lure cardholders into a subscription. But what we've seen recently is that quite often use images of influencers or B and C prominent people out of the region of South America, Asia, and Russia. So maybe a little extra check is worth it. And now I'm finished. I thank you very much for the attention and give the word back to Leanne.
Wow, thank you, Andreas. That was clearly very eye-opening and super insightful. There was a lot of information shared today, so of course we hope it was beneficial. If you do have any questions, then please feel free to submit them through the question section of your panel, or of course you can reach out to myself or Andreas there on the screen. We also have several resources available for you, and they have been posted in the handout section of the webinar. So again, please feel free to download and have some light reading, and of course reach out if you need anything further. Thank you so much for joining us today as we've explored the evolving landscape of digital risk within Eastern Europe. We really hope the insights shared today were helpful. And of course, the G2 Risk Solutions team is here to support you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you need anything at all. Thank you so much. Take care.